And hello, welcome back to the Fighting and I podcast. I just want to say thank you to everybody who tuned in last week. We had 140 viewers on the last episode, and that's absolutely fucking insane to me. On my first episode as well, so thank you very much. Sorry to everyone who to listen to that. But on with the UFC card on the weekend, we had UFC 259, Jan Blachowicz versus Israel Adesanya. The champ fight, Israel Adesanya going up from middleweight to light heavyweight, and this being Jan's first defence. It was a pretty decent card. Started off really well, and then sort of went like kind of limp in my opinion halfway through the card. Out of 15 fights, there's 7 finishes, and we also got the first ever title changeover by disqualification, which we'll talk about more later. The commentary on this card, so biased, and I've always been a big sort of believer that Cormier and Rogan are really good. And they are really, really good. But tonight, I really noticed the bias, especially when obviously DC was commentating for Islam's fight. Islam does train at the same camp as DC, aka, so understandable there's a slight bias there. But in the Israel Adesanya fight, I believe at the end of the second round, DC and Rogan were talking about something, and Rogan just straight out said Blachowicz is getting outlanded though. And then going into the third round, Jon Anik then said, but Blachowicz has outstruck him. So they were all really riding Izzy's dick. And it was really, you can really see it. And then DC got his telestrator. They gave him the telestrator, and he must have been stoned because he was just drawing random shit. And some of his stuff normally was really good. I don't know, maybe he was just too excited because it was a good card, but he was just drawing terribleness. Anyway, a few fights announced over the last couple of weeks. We've got Shane Burgos and Edson Barboza being added to UFC 262. That'll be a good scrap. Barboza coming off a win over Makwan Murakami. Recently moving down in the featherweight division, going 1-1. Obviously, his loss coming to a close decision to Dan Ige, which a lot of people thought Barboza won. And the same with Burgos coming off and with Burgos coming off a loss to Josh Emmett in what was a fight of the year contender. It was an absolute war, and I believe that'll be the same for this fight. Obviously, Burgos has got fantastic pressure, and he has got nice boxing. His chin is not questionable, but he is a little bit chinny. Barboza only really been knocked out stone cold in the UFC once against Justin Gaethje. Fantastic leg kicks, obviously fantastic kicks in general. That switch kick to the body, the spinning heel kick, his knees as well. He's just a great flyer all out. So that'll be a scrap and a half. Matt Brown versus Diego Lima has also been added to an undisclosed fight night, which has not been announced yet, but that'll also be a good fight. Diego Lima coming off a loss to Bilal Muhammad, and Matt Brown coming off a loss to Carlos Condit. So some good fights being added to some upcoming cards. In other news in the MMA world, Dan Hardy's been let go by the UFC and BT. Dan Hardy, a former fighter, had to stop because he got a really rare heart condition. Couldn't get cleared to fight, so he became sort of like a commentator and had quite a few spin-off shows under the UFC BT and on the UFC Fight Pass with John Gooden. Apparently had a disagreement with a female co-worker on Fight Island, and unfortunately won't be appearing in anything for UFC and BT in terms of in an analytical way. He still does have a fighter contract under the UFC, so it doesn't mean he can't fight. You won't be seeing him doing the inside the cage breakdown with John Gooden and other things. He still obviously has his YouTube channel, The Full Reptile, where he breaks down fights, and it's a fantastic channel. Dan Hardy can be a little bit weird, but he does have fantastic insight and fantastic knowledge. Oh, and as well, JDS and Overeem got cut. JDS makes a little bit of sense, 4-fight losing streak. Overeem, not so much. He was on a 4-fight winning streak before fighting Volkov, and then obviously he got knocked out against Volkov. JDS, like I said, makes a lot more sense. He's losing 4 fights, and I think he was finished in all of them fights. So, sad to see them go, but JDS, understandable. Overeem, I still think he's got a little bit of juice left in him. But if you're wanting some fights to go back and remember them both, you've got all 3 fights with Kane for JDS, even though obviously 2 of those fights are losses. His first fight was insane, and the other 2 fights as well are still absolutely mental. Same with Overeem, you've got his fight with Brock Lesnar. Absolutely fantastic performance, obviously coming in as Uberim at the time, facing on Brock Lesnar. He just absolutely murdered his body and shut him down. It was beautiful, and his fight. He had a fantastic fight as well with Mark Hunt. I believe it was the second fight he finished Mark Hunt with knees. So just and it's obviously all his Pride fights and his fights in Strikeforce as well. Both of them have got fantastic scraps. JDS has got a really good knockout over Fabricio Verdum. He's knocked out quite a few. Obviously, a knockout stoppage over what's his face? Can't remember his name. Taito Uvasa, and he also beat Derek Lewis. So both good fighters. Sad to see them go, but Overeem's probably going to go to Japan and take steroids, and JDS might just stay retired unless he also goes to Japan and does steroids. But we move on to UFC 259. Like I said at the start, it was a decent night of fights. Started off really, really strong and then sort of waned a little bit halfway through the card, and then had one of the most slowest starts to a card in Thiago Santos and Alexander Rakic, but we'll talk about that later. It was just, the fight was absolutely abysmal, but like I said, it was a long card, 15 fights, but we did get 7 finishes, and 5 of those finishes came in the first 5 fights, so that was pretty nice. Taking a look at the card, just to run through it quickly, and then I'll go into some of the fights that I enjoyed and some of the ones that were where the performance were impressive. Trevin Jones versus Mario Bautista. Trevin Jones knocked him out in round 2. It was like a beautiful, sort of like a corkscrew uppercut, if you will. He came in with a lead hook, just as Mario Bautista was throwing like an overhand. He came in with like a lead hook and then like an uppercut, then switched it into a hook. So it was sort of like a corkscrew. That was a beautiful knockout. Elon Cruz got knocked out by Uros Medic. It was a very, very fantastic fight. Elon Cruz going down from moving up from featherweight to lightweight. Landed 0 strikes. I think it was 48 strikes thrown for Uros, and then absolutely 0 strikes landed for Elon Cruz. So it was rough to watch. That was one of the worst stoppages on the card. It was painful to watch, a little bit upsetting. But moving on to women's strawweight, we had Livia Souza got knocked out by Amanda Lemos. Amanda Lemos showing great power for a woman's strawweight. Sat Souza down early with a right hand over the top, and then they scrambled on the ground for a bit. They stood up, and then Lemos hit her with a real stiff jab that just sat Souza down. And before Lemos could really go in for the really hard ground and pound, the referee saw it off and just stopped it. Which was a good stoppage, good fight as well. Like I said, a lot of power displayed from a women's strawweight, which would be interesting mix into that division. Welterweight, undefeated Sean Brady now goes 14-0. Submitting Jake Matthews in at round 3. Interesting facts about Jake Matthews: never fought a ranked opponent in the UFC. All his fights come away with unranked opponents. Sean Brady obviously on a 2-fight winning streak. Sean Brady obviously a undefeated prospect coming in against Jake. Jake already proven himself in the UFC countless times. Brady managed to really put on a performance. They managed to get Jake down and submit him. You had Kennedy Nzechukwu taking on Carlos Ulberg. Now that got fight of the night, and for good reason. Carlos, in fact, we'll talk about this fight now because I've got notes for this fight, and it was a good fight. So Carlos Ulberg trains with City Kickboxing Academy in New Zealand, with Kai Kara France, Alexander Volkanovski sometimes. What's his face? Obviously Israel Adesanya, and then all the others that Israel's brought into the UFC. But he was being touted obviously as a quite a young hot prospect, going 5-0 professionally before coming into the UFC. But he was coming in against Kennedy Nzechukwu. Carlos, in the first opening stanza of the fight, managed to hurt him early. Got a few really good strikes off, but then gassed himself out trying to go for the finish, and that's when Kennedy really started to sort of lumber forward and put combinations together. And the difference is what they were doing is Carlos was throwing a few strikes, but most of them he was throwing with full power, whereas Kennedy was throwing 2 or 3 strikes out before getting down Carlos's timing, and then as Carlos was exiting, would catch him with that fourth shot with a bit of power. But the first round was absolutely insane. Both fighters going toe-to-toe, just trading punches. Carlos Ulberg really doing a good job at the start of the fight, mixing up punches to the body and to the head, and also working the legs and working the body with kicks. But like I said, he did gas himself quite early going for that finish, and that led to Kennedy coming back in at round 2 and landing a brutal left hook against the cage in an exchange where again he threw 3 strikes beforehand, with a little bit of power, and then got Carlos's timed as he was Carlos was trying to slip out to the right, and Kennedy threw that left hook and caught him and knocked him out. It was an absolutely crazy fight. We then move up to the flyweight division. This was the first decision on the card. It was Tim Elliott taking on Jordan Espinoza. A little bit of drama surrounding this fight because Tim Elliott was saying to Jordan Espinoza, "You're a woman beater," while taking him down against the cage. a bit personal. Yeah, you don't much to really say on that. Or hopefully it's not true and it's just someone trying to push buttons, which is a dick thing to do. But Tim Elliott grinds and Jordan Espinosa are out for a decision. It was quite a good performance, to be fair, from Tim Elliott, coming off a few back-to-back losses. And then we moved into the prelims. Those were the Fight Press prelims, like the pre-prelims, and then these are the ESPN prelims. Kai Kara-France knocks out Rogerio Bontorin with 5 seconds left in the round, and oh my god! Again, I'll talk about this because I've got the notes here. Let me just pull them up. There we go. Started off with a few exchanges. Kai Kara-France landing early with quite a bit of power. Rogerio sort of noticed that, took him down straight away, and had the back for literally about 3 minutes. Then Kai Kara-France, there was up against the cage. There was around about 30 seconds left at this point of round one. What Kai Kara-France did, as Bontorin was sort of like backpacking himself, had his legs around in the leg lock, in the leg triangle around Kai Kara-France's waist, and then also was trying to go for the neck as Kai Kara-France was standing up. Kai Kara-France grabbed his foot, flipped him round, so Bontorin was on the front, shoved him off. Like I said, 30 seconds left at this point in the round. They start trading up against the fence. Kai Kara-France again starts to land quite early. Starts to land again with quite a lot of power, and then with 5 seconds left, lands a beautiful combination. It lands a right hand, sort of as like Rogerio goes to throw like an overhand right, but Kai Kara-France hits him with a right hand and then follows up with a right uppercut and then with a right hand again. And then Bontorin just face planted and rolled over onto his back. Kai Kara-France ran off celebrating. Herb Dean didn't know what to do. Nobody knew what to do. And then Eugene Behrman in City Kickboxing's corner said to Kai Kara-France, "Stop celebrating, go over and finish it." Because obviously Herb Dean had not said anything yet. He runs over to go and throw the finishing punch, but Herb Dean just says, no, it's done. A fantastic fight. Great showed by Kai Kara-France. He attributed his performance and gave a bit of a shout out to Mark Hunt for the walk-off, but it was insane. We're not seeing Kai Kara-France really display that much power, but my god, it was a fantastic fight. And then poor Joey B taking on Askar Askarov. Askar Askarov, the 12-0 at the time, undefeated prospect from Dagestan. Fantastic wrestling, obviously, and also good Chris stand-up, which we're seeing a lot more now coming from these Dagestan fighters. They've got the elite, obviously, wrestling pedigree, but then they're throwing in kicks. You look at Israel Makhachev, obviously Askar Askarov, Umar Nurmagomedov, Khabib's younger cousin, all throw fantastic kicks. But in this fight, it was, again, Askar Askarov taking on Joey Benavidez. Unfortunately, Joey B coming off 2 pretty dominant losses to Figueiredo, to Davis and Figueiredo for the flyweight championship, getting knocked out in the first fight, and then having a rematch and getting submitted. Rough for Joseph, but obviously came into this fight looking to get that win, but he faced an unsolvable problem so far in Askar Askarov. Askar just controlled him with relative ease on the floor, took him down at any point without sort of any defense from Joseph Benavidez, and really also got some of his strikes off on JB as well. Got a lot of combinations flowing, and we just managed to work everything together quite beautifully over 15 rounds. During the fight, obviously, Joey Benavidez, notorious for having a big old head and liking to headbutt, came in a few times. Didn't even throw strikes on the break or on the entrance. Just came in, dinked his forehead on Askar Askarov's forehead, and then faded out. And was like, well, maybe that'll show you, but it didn't do anything. Askar Askarov just kept pushing forward and putting on an absolutely insane pace. Unfortunately, Joey B just couldn't get anything together. He couldn't put anything successful together against Askar, and he was really loading up, which Askar was reading, going for random flying knees, like when Askar was quite a bit away from him. It was just unfortunate to watch. But at the end of the day, at least he gets to go home to Megan O'Leary, so it's not always a loss for Joey. Moving on, Song Yadong lost to Kyler Phillips in a good fight, a good display for Kyler Phillips. I've always liked him since TUF 27. He was a fantastic fighter then, but since his debut in the UFC, he's really sort of come into his own right and really displayed some of his striking and his wrestling prowess as well. Song Yadong, a well-touted prospect in the UFC, I believe, going 9-0-1 in the UFC, so having quite a good record, not dispatching Marlon Vera in a close fight. But unfortunately, again, he couldn't really get much going against Kyler Phillips. Kyler just proved to be too lucid, throwing the strikes perfectly, mixing up with the legs, going in with the body as well, going up to the head, and then throwing in some of the takedowns as well. Good performance. I did seem to think Kyler Phillips did get a little bit tired because he does have quite a loosey-goosey style, likes to bounce around a lot, but good win nevertheless at bantamweight, and that's over quite a young touted prospect as well. Obviously, he was Song Yadong on a little bit of a rise, and then obviously had the Marlon Vera fight. A lot of people thought that Marlon Vera won that, so that lost a little bit of stock for Song Yadong. It's obviously unfortunate to see, but he'll bounce back. He's a fantastic fighter. The featured bout on the prelims, it was Casey Kenny versus Dominic Cruz. Now, this was a really good fight. I really did enjoy this. I always do enjoy watching Dominic Cruz. I think his figure of eight style is fantastic. The way he's created his own striking style in MMA. Well, you've never seen anyone fight like that. It's absolutely insane. But it was a fantastic fight. Casey Kenny did really well early, sort of rounds 1 and at the half of round 2. The first half of the round in round 2, really working those leg kicks well. Like I said in the last episode, that one of the ways that Henry Cejudo showed to beat Dominic Cruz was to kick the leg, and not the leg that he would step off, the leg that he would sort of leave lingering, which Casey Kenny did really well. But unfortunately, for some reason, halfway through round 2, he just stopped throwing the leg kicks and just decided to chase Dominic and try to outstrike him, which is never a good idea. Obviously, Dominic's got fantastic striking, and really that like I said, that figure of 8 movement really throws fighters off. It's not something that you can really train for. It's not something that you can really really practice against, because nobody can master it. It's Dominic Cruz's own patented style in bantamweight, and it really shows because he really does lull people into his game. You know, obviously, unless your name's Cody Garbrandt or Henry Cejudo, he lulled Casey Kenny to stop throwing the leg kicks and just chase him down with punches. Casey Kenny did do well, don't get me wrong. It was a split decision win. A split decision where one of the judges had it in favour of Casey Kenny, because, and I can see that because on some of the breaks, Casey Kenny was throwing, was managing to time Dominic on his entrances and his exits. He obviously dips to the left or to the right, and then sort of lunges in, and then continues to dip off in the opposite way he dipped in with, to avoid any sort of big strikes. It's a really weird, awkward way to fight, but it's a good way to throw your opponent off. And Casey did a good job of timing Dominic when he was coming in on those entrances and exits with a few strikes, a few hooks. But ultimately, Dominic Cruz just outpaced and outstruck Casey. Oh, I don't know how it struck, sorry. I think it was quite close on the scoreboards, hence the split decision. But a leg takedown, 2 takedowns in round 3 for Dominic and a bit of control time. In my eyes, winning the fight. It was a good fight, good display. I've got to talk about this fight now. Right, okay. Light heavyweight. This is the opener of the main card, which has been and let me just paint the picture. Quite a few knockouts, quite a few finishes on the prelims. The decisions that were there were quite dominant, apart from the Dominic Cruz decision. So really set up a high pace for the start of the round. The last time that Thiago Santos, that I saw him open up a main card, was again when Max Holloway fought Brian Ortega, and that was when Thiago Santos fought Jimmy Manuwa, and that was just mental. And this had all the makings of a war, but no, it was absolutely dreadful. The notes that I've got that I put down after watching it was just fuck off, Rakic, boring fight, insanely disappointing, nothing else to discuss. I'm obviously going to go into it a bit more, but it was so boring. The worst thing is Rakic's personality after a close win. It went to a unanimous decision, but I don't think it was unanimous. It could have gone either way because both fighters hardly did anything. But Alexander Rakic in his press conference said, you saw me, I took that man's soul. He didn't take anything. He hesitated. He refused to counter strike. Thiago Santos did the exact same thing. Refused to move, being really sort of like pitter-patter with his strikes, not trying to set anything up. Obviously, we know Santos is a huge power puncher down at middleweight and even up at 205 pounds. A lot of people thought Thiago Santos won in that fight against John Jones. He fought on 2 legs and went to a close decision where it was split. And then obviously, unfortunately, he had some time off due to those leg injuries, and then fought Glover Teixeira and basically got himself submitted by being silly. So this was his sort of his way to reintroduce himself back into that title contention or that title conversation by knocking off Alexander Rakic, who is an up and coming in his own right. Obviously, the knockout over Jimmy Manuwa, the win over Alexander Smith. Anthony Smith was disappointing again. Alexander Rakic didn't do much. He just lied on him for like 40 minutes and then got off with 10-second less and put his hand up. He's a little bit of a dick. Not fun, but really boring fight. Do yourself a favour if you skip it, don't watch it. Really not worth it. It's just not. It just wasn't fun. There was nothing fun about it. Both fighters just refused to pressure. Both fighters refused to come forward. It was just bleh. A stale opener, unfortunately. But we do move on. Lightweight, Islam Makhachev obviously fought Drew Dober. Islam Makhachev, again, same with Askar Askarov, being a Dagestani elite wrestler and also being quite competent with the striking, knocking out Gleison Tibau with a really nice uppercut when they fought. Obviously, Drew Dober coming off 3 knockout wins over up-and-coming prospects. Alexandre Hernandez, Marco Polo Reyes, and what's his face, Nasrat Haqparast. What can I say? Islam is just a wish version of Khabib, and what I mean no disrespect by that. I just mean that it's just Khabib. It's just off-brand Khabib. All he did, credits to him. He's got a style that works, and it's proven that it works. He's got people championships. It's got people, 29-0 undefeated record for his former teammate Khabib. I say former because obviously Khabib's retired. Retired in quotation marks. But Islam Makhachev, really, it was a predictable fight. Obviously, I wanted Drew Dober to win just so he could carry on riding that high streak. But we sort of all of MMA, the MMA universe knew that Islam Makhachev was more than likely gonna win against Dober, because Dober has struggled before with grappling, and when you're coming up against someone who's trained by and trained with Khabib and everyone else, obviously Khabib's father when he was alive, obviously taught Makhachev as well, and everyone else that you've got at the Eagle Wrestling Academy in Russia, in Dagestan. So yeah, Makhachev just took him down. A lot of beautiful trips. If you're into working on the ground and if you're into to takedowns, I am. I quite enjoyed it. When I say predictable, I don't mean it in a boring way. I mean you just. Makhachev is Makhachev. He's from Dagestan. He's going to wrestle. And that's what he did. That's what I mean by predictable. But he got a lot of beautiful takedowns as well. And when he finished the fight, it got credited as an arm triangle, but to me it looked more like a sort of Von Flue choke, because it looked like Islam was still in half guard, and then his shoulder was putting on all the pressure on Drew Dober's throat, as opposed to Dober's being arm up, and it was his own arm trapping the vein. It was a good win, really, really good win for Islam Makhachev. We've not seen him in the cage since September 2019, so been off for a hot minute. He just needs activity. I think they said, I think Dana White said it himself, or I watched it on something on Twitter. Someone was saying, obviously, what Islam Makhachev needs it's Daniel Cormier, sorry. What Islam Makhachev needs activity. Obviously, Khabib had a lot of time off with the weight issues and some injuries. And then when he came back and went active and was actually active, he became world champion. I think that's what we need to see from Islam, is just a lot more activity. He didn't look rusty at all. He looked absolutely fine, extremely comfortable in there, handled Drew Dober at will, just took him down whenever he wanted to and controlled him with relative ease. Nothing really come back from Dober in the terms of in power or strike output. Good fight, but a predictable performance from Makhachev, but a good win to get under his belt. It's obviously going to boost him up in the rankings a little bit. And he called out Tony Ferguson. That is, in my eyes, a really good fight to make. Obviously, Islam wants it because of the history between Tony and Khabib. Says that Tony talks too much, and I don't really know what Tony will say to it. He'll probably neglect it because I don't know. I think he'll just, he might deny it. He might not. He might surprise us all and take the fight, but it'd be a good fight for him. If he could knock off Islam Makhachev, it would be insane. Not feathering his cap, but an insane thing to do. Coming off a dominant loss from Charles Oliveira and then getting whitewashed by Justin Gaethje, shattering all hopes of, unfortunately, a title shot, which is upsetting to see. But if you could dispatch Islam Makhachev, we could see him then go up and go back to exactly where I was before the Justin Gaethje fight and go and challenge for that title. But we'll let the matchmakers do that in UFC. Thank God I don't have that job. Now, the title fight between Aljamain Sterling and Petr Yan, or Petr Yan. For how long it lasted, it was really good. 4 rounds, a lot of good moments in that fight for both fighters. Unfortunately, this was what I was alluding to earlier. This was the fight that was the loss via DQ and the first title to change hands in the UFC via DQ. Petr Yan flowing a clearly illegal knee while Aljamain was grounded, and the referee even said he's grounded. Aljamain was down on one knee, which in Nevada is classed as a downed opponent. Petr looked over to his corner. I think there was about 30 seconds left in the round. Looked over to his corner, and then just looked at Sterling and just kneed him right in the side of the temple. A lot of people on Twitter saying obviously he's acting, that it should have just been 2 points. Blah 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 blah. No, absolutely not. Getting kneed in the head while you're not looking is insane. But getting kneed in the head by Petr Yan, who trains out of Tiger Muay Thai, is another thing. You know what I mean? It's people saying that are fucking stupid. I've been concussed myself before. You can sort of, people saying, oh, he said he was concussed and he's taking photos after. I've been concussed, and then I went 24 hours before going to, not a good idea obviously, but before going to a doctor's, because I didn't realise. Because it might have not been as intense, it might have been quite strong, but it does sort of slowly wear off, as concussions do. They wear off over time. It might have just been a sort of a big shock. It might have just been, it could have even been shock as opposed to a concussion. You might have even just had a bit of shock, and then because it's a big knee, it's a big strike to eat on the floor with absolutely no cover, and it was flush, and in quite close quarters where Yan can generate a lot of power. But it was really upsetting to watch Aljamain's reaction after, because as soon as they stopped the fight, he started to cry. They put the belt on him and he took the belt off him on the floor. Obviously, he's taking pictures of this now and he's a little bit happy with it now. Not helping himself on Twitter by calling out Henry Cejudo. But it is what it is, In terms of the actual fight itself, before the illegal knee, I was really enjoying it. Both of these fighters are fantastic caliber fighters at bantamweight. Aljamain was fighting like he was in... Henry Cejudo said this. He was fighting like he was in the Pedro Munoz fight, trying to really outstrike Petr Yan. But what Aljamain forgot to take into consideration is this was 5 rounds, not 3 rounds. And this is against Petr Yan, not the same caliber of striker as Pedro Munoz. Obviously, great fighters in their own right, but Petr Yan does have more crisper and more technical striking than Pedro Munoz. So obviously, Aljamain started really fast and really early, throwing a lot of combinations. And when Aljo strikes, he doesn't throw with power. He throws with more sort of like 50% just to tire you out and really set up his unorthodox takedowns. He's a fantastic. He was throwing some really good strikes, and he was mixing it up quite well to the body as well, going up high, going to the top, mixing him. He's got a beautiful rear leg body kick, rear leg teep to the body, where he really snaps gets the ball of the foot into the gut of Yan. It was good to see, and then he obviously was mixing it up, getting a few takedowns, but Yan really started to sort of come into his own over the end of the second, and then going into the third and fourth. A little bit like a Russian Terminator. Yan does tend to start slow. He had a lot of troubles with Aldo in their fight in the first 2 rounds. Obviously, Aldo was working leg kicks early, which Aljamain doesn't do a lot of. He was throwing a few, but not throwing as much as maybe would be to be desired. But Aljamain and Petr really did put on a good fight for the duration that they were fighting. Petr Yan showed his fantastic trips. They were orgasmic. Some of the trips that he was getting on a high-level wrestler like Aljamain Sterling. I don't know if Aljamain was doing it obviously to try and get Petr to the ground or what, but some of the trips that Petr were landing were absolutely insane. If the illegal knee didn't happen, I saw it in all honesty going to Petr Yan. Petr Yan either by decision or by a knockout, just because Aljo was waning. He even admitted himself on Twitter that he'd gassed out, and his pressure was his pressure wasn't waning, but his his strikes were clearly laboured, and you could see he was lumbering into things, and he wasn't as smooth, and his takedowns were a lot more sloppier. Obviously, Sterling has fought and stood up with competent strikers in the past, but that's after he's weighing on them for a round and a half with his wrestling and his clinch work and his strikes. But Petr Yan in the third and fourth round really started to put things together and was working Aljo's body really well, and all the shots you could tell they hurt. It was a really good fight. Obviously, the disqualification is a really, really shit way for a fight to win. But they'll obviously rematch. Dana White's all up for it. Aljamain is, and so is Petr Yan. Good fight. Give it a watch. Obviously, the knee is a bit upsetting, but it is what it is. Second championship fight on the bill. Amanda Nunes versus the last fighter in women's featherweight. Women's featherweight. That's all I've got to say. Nah, I'm not joking. But seriously, I do think women's featherweight is eventually going to be dissipated, because what is the point at the minute? It's got three fighters in it. The champion Nunes, Megan Anderson, and Felicia Spencer. Nunes has absolutely beat the piss out of Felicia Spencer, and she also beat and choked the piss out of Megan Anderson. What is the point of that division? There's no official rankings. There was tough for it, but as soon as those fighters came in, they dropped straight down to 135, and some even lower. So what's the point of having it? In all honesty, you've given Nunes a division to clear out. She's cleared it out. Just say, listen, we'll acknowledge it, but we're just going to get rid of the division because there's no point. There's not even any real clear contenders for her at 135 pounds at bantamweight. Obviously, Juliana Pena was calling her out, but Juliana Pena is only on a one-fight winning streak and got submitted by Germaine de Randamie. Amanda Nunes, it's not a good fight for Juliana Pena, in my opinion. Obviously, I don't think there's any good fights for Amanda Nunes apart from the Valentina Shevchenko fight. But the only complication that surrounds that is that obviously Amanda's already 2-0 up against Shevchenko. So whether Dana and the UFC will put that together, or even whether Amanda Nunes will accept it, because at the end of the day, she's in her eyes, she's beat Shevchenko twice. Where else is there for her to go? Cyborg's gone to a different company. They can't do the Cyborg Nunes rematch. No one's there to challenge her. She's beaten Germaine de Randamie twice. She's beaten pretty much everyone. She's beaten Holly Holm. She's absolutely murdered Holly Holm. Like, what's next? Raquel Pennington. What is next? What is next for her? Unless she somehow manages to drop weight, but I doubt she'll do. I doubt she will be able to, because she's a big girl, is Aramanda. But it was a good display. Obviously, Megan Anderson landed 2 strikes in that fight and just got mauled. Amanda Nunes came straight out the gate and landed a beautiful right hand just as Megan was coming in for a takedown, which sent Megan a little bit west, a little bit wobbly, and then Amanda Nunes pushed her against the cage again, hit a beautiful overhand right just over the top of Megan's guard, just on sort of the top of the head, and then I believe Megan went in for the takedown again, and then she locked up like an invert. It was a triangle choke, rear naked armbar in a way, because the way she had the triangle choke in is her calf muscle was on Megan's neck. So as she was tightening the grip with the locked leg, the calf would have been pressing harder against Megan's throat, and then on top of that you had the armbar. It was a really creative finish, but what's the point in having that division? There's a really good thing that I saw on Twitter after the fight where DC is on air. I think he must have thought that he wasn't on air, but he's basically saying like, "Oh, that Amanda Nunes Megan Anderson fight was razor close. She's gonna struggle sleeping at night," and I love that. I love DC. I love unfiltered DC. I need me more of that. Anyway, on to the main event. A very technical fight, and this is a technical fight where it's not like a fight where it's boring and people just say, it's technical. No, this was an actual technical fight. You obviously got Israel Adesanya, at the time an undefeated kickboxing, undefeated in MMA. I believe it was a 102 record, something like that in kickboxing. Not 100% sure, but I know it's quite high in terms of wins and quite low in terms of losses. Obviously, Jan Blachowicz, somewhat a really heartwarming story. Well, not even somewhat, a very heartwarming story. Fight starting in the UFC 2-4, fighting for his job, fights all the way back up to take the championship, and then hand the an undefeated future legend his first loss, and to do it so technically as well was a fantastic performance. Obviously, as he moved up from middleweight to 205 pounds in light heavyweight, Blachowicz has fought light heavyweight his entire life and was already 2-0 against, or maybe 3-0, I can't remember, but he's basically everyone that's come up from middleweight and Jan's fought, he's beat. So he's added another notch to that record, and he's just the middleweight, light heavyweight killer. The only one he hasn't beat, is Thiago Santos, who he got knocked out by, which would be, obviously at the minute there's absolutely no chance of that rematch. But the fight was really interesting. I really, really enjoyed it. It was a real chess battle in terms of Israel Adesanya trying to figure out how to get a power strike through to put Jan in danger, and Jan trying to find a way to obviously negate that and come through with his legendary Polish power. Both fighters had great moments in this fight. The judges' scorecard was absolutely mental. I do believe Izzy won the first 2 rounds just in terms of strike, and I don't mean that in a like a biased way. I just think some of his strikes had a little bit more sauce on it in the earlier rounds, and then obviously rounds 3, 4, and 5, Jan Blachowicz started to hit him a lot more, and then also took him down in round 4 and round 5, and controlled him for sort of the later parts of both of those rounds. But I do think Israel Adesanya won those two first rounds. Only 10-9s, not close. And then obviously Jan Blachowicz taking 3 10-9s. I'd even argue in round 4 a 10-8, because obviously he had quite a bit of ground control time, around about 3 minutes plus, and then quite a few ground and pound strikes as well. And then in round 5, he finished his ground and pound with quite with the last 15 seconds around 5 with a bit of a flurry of dangerous ground and pound strikes. But I've got to say, Israel didn't look as good at light heavyweight. He didn't look as fast. His feints were all there still, obviously. He did look fast in terms of, compared to Jan, because obviously Jan's a big a light heavyweight. He is fast, but he's fast for a light heavyweight. Israel Adesanya is fast, but he didn't seem to do as good in the exchanges in terms of getting the shots off, compared to other fights. If you look, obviously, I know this is obviously at middleweight, quite a bit of weight loss, but if you look at this fight with Robert Whittaker, Israel was leading, getting into exchanges and outlanding and sliding out. With Blachowicz, he wasn't able ever to do that. Jan did a really good job at really checking Israel Adesanya's leg kicks, which is a huge thing for Israel, is his leg kicks. He sets those up to then mix it up to the top with the question mark kick, with the front kick, or even just your sort of standard high kick. But Jan really did a good job of shutting that down early and not letting Israel Adesanya land the leg kick. Sometimes when Adesanya did switch stance, he'd land the inside low kick, but the outside he was quite privy to. Blachowicz was. Jan landed a few good leg kicks of his own, and also got a few really good combinations off on Israel. Worked his body well, didn't really work his body that well, but got a few shots off in the body and went up top. There's a beautiful photo that I've included on this picture where Jan is catching Israel Adesanya with a straight, sort of like an overhand right as Izzy's trying to throw the jab. Really connected on with Izzy, which we haven't seen Izzy been hit that much since his Gastelum fight. But yeah, it was a really, really technical performance. Jan Blachowicz showed his fantastic fight IQ by going for those takedowns late in the round. Obviously, he said in his post-fight press conference that he'd attempted it once or twice in the later stages of the earlier stages of the fight, but Israel was quite tricky and quite easy to evade, quite easy for him to evade the takedown. And Blachowicz also got a headlock on Israel Adesanya, but again, Israel managed to weasel his way out and slip off. So Jan did credit the reason for the late takedowns and the fact that he wanted to wait for Izzy was a little bit more tired, a little bit slower on his feet, which is a fantastic job to do, because he really did. If anything, he kind of lulled Adesanya into Jan's game by Jan playing Adesanya's game for 3 rounds, and then boom, takedown round 4, and Israel really didn't expect it, and he was then controlled for 3+ minutes and outstruck on the ground. Same with round 5. Izzy started off with a little bit of success. Jan fired back and then instantly took him down with a double leg, and then again controlled him for 2 minutes on the ground. A really, really good display for Jan Blachowicz, and again, his story is fantastic. Gone from 2-4 in the UFC to champion, knocking off Israel Adesanya, a generational talent in terms of this kickboxing and striking prowess. A tough loss for Izzy. At least he didn't get washed out. At least it wasn't a knockout. He stood in there for 5 rounds against a big light heavyweight. And obviously there's got to be like a 30-40 pound difference in weight when they fight on fight night. The weight is obviously 205 on weighing day, but the fighters then balloon back up after that to their natural weight, and Jan Blachowicz must weigh around 225, 230 after the fact. So that's a lot of muscle and a lot of meat for Israel to deal with. But he did a good job, and he showed really good initiative in the clinch. Was grabbing the back of the head and then peeling off against the cage instead of just accepting the position. So it was a really good technical fight for both fighters. Israel's still the champion of the middleweight division. I do think at the minute there's no real clear threat to Israel Adesanya at middleweight. And Jan, Glover Teixeira next. I'd love to see that fight. Obviously, Glover deserves it. He's knocked off 4 young prospects, and he's, like he says, he's not getting any younger. So, great fight. Really good fight night. I really enjoyed it. Obviously, don't watch Santos versus Rakic. Do watch Jan Blachowicz versus Israel Adesanya. So, take a look at next Saturday's card. We've got a fight night originally scheduled to be Khamzat Chimaev taking on Leon Edwards. Obviously, due to the unfortunate situation with Khamzat and COVID, he's had to pull out of the fight, and Belal stepped in on short notice. Quite a decent-ish lineup of fights quite often on Saturday. Obviously, you've got Leon Edwards and Malal Muhammad topping the bill. You've got Ryan Spann taking on Mishka Serkinov in the light heavyweight. Ben Rothwell versus Felipe Lins. Danige, Kevin Tucker. Angela Hill versus Ashley Yoder. Manel Cape and Matthias Nicolau. Eric Anders versus Darren Stewart. So that's a good main card, a long main card as well. Obviously, providing those fights do go ahead and nothing gets taken off due to COVID or any other issues. Quite a long prelims as well. Obviously, you've got Nasrat Haqparast returning against Don Madge. Charles Jourdain at featherweight, he's a very good fight. He's a fantastic fighter to watch. He's obviously making his return. So yeah, it's going to be a good night of fights. This fight did catch me by surprise, in all honesty, and just not because Belal's not a good opponent, just because I didn't expect it. But it does make sense if you look at the fight on paper. Obviously, both fighters going 18-3 professionally. Leon riding an 8-fight winning streak, and Belal Muhammad winning 8 in his last 9 fights. His only loss in that 9-fight streak was to Jeff Neal. Obviously, Jeff Neal, a very big contender, a very big name at welterweight at the minute. Obviously, unfortunately, just lost to Wonderboy. But yeah, it's going to be a really good fight, in all honesty. Leon Edwards, I've been wanting to see him fight for quite some time. I really wanted to see him fight Woodley. I thought that was a really good fight for Leon, and I also thought the same with Khamzat Chimaev. I thought, Leon's going to really shock a few people in this, because if people thought Khamzat was going to run over him, I thought it was going to be a lot closer than a lot of people thought. But Belal's a good fight as well, stylistically, for Leon. Obviously, Belal tends to favour a lot of pressure wrestling, pressure clinching. Doesn't throw anything too crazy, anything too fancy, but Leon Edwards has got really refined kickboxing and clinch skills. Works in a camp in Birmingham with his brother Fabian Edwards, and obviously Tom Breeze as well, which are both fantastic fighters. Fabian Edwards having success in Bellator, and Tom Breeze having mixed success in the UFC. But anyway, the camp has produced some great fighters, and Leon Edwards is one of those fighters. He's a fantastic clinch work, and also his striking as well is beautiful. He's got a break at an elbow as he hits with his lead elbow. I believe it's his left. As the clinch breaks, and he catches a lot of opponents. He catched Gunnar Nelson with it in their fight and knocked him down and caused a welt on the left eye. Under the right eye of Gunnar Nelson. So Leon's got a lot of good tools in the toolbox to utilize against Belal, but also so does Belal. Again, good wrestling, and we have seen Leon got taken down against Kamaru, but that's not a surprise. But he also got taken down against Gunnar Nelson. Obviously, he did reverse the position, but it's a good fight in my opinion. I'm going to really enjoy it now. Taking a look at the fight, I've watched a few fights from Belal and a few fights from Leon today just to see what sort of paths each fighter could take in terms of like a path to victory. And to be fair, both these fighters do everything that I've put down already. For Leon, obviously, Leon likes to work the lead leg. Leon needs to work Bilal's legs often and early. Bilal's shown quite a few weaknesses with his legs. He's shown it in the Curtis Millender fight, I believe, a little bit in the Diego Lima fight, and the Lyman Good fight as well. And Bilal's got quite an upright stance, and he doesn't dip his head quite often. So I believe Leon will see that and work the jab straight quite effectively, and maybe finish with a kick, either to the legs, to the body, or even eventually up top once an opening presents itself. Another good thing, like I said previously as well, that Leon has is his clinch work. He's got fantastic trips and elbows and knees in the clinch. I think that will surprise Muhammad as well, because he's probably expecting to outwork Leon in the clinch, but he's quite savvy in the clinch, is Leon. But yeah, that's Leon's, everything that, I sort of took note of. Leon already does. He already works the 1-2 straight down the middle if he can land it. Works the body really well. Really does well at working the kicks to the legs. And he also looks fucking lean for this fight. It is insane. He looks shredded, and I mean, like, it's insane. Go and find that photo of him next to, I think, his coach. He posted this week. Oh my god, he's so jacked. Anyway, for Belal, enough about Leon Edwards' jacked body here. For Belal, what he sort of needs to do is again what he does quite a lot, is a lot of dirty work. He needs to make this fight very, very dirty. He needs to get real close to Leon, so Leon can't work those leg kicks and start to work his long reach advantage and his 1-2s. Obviously, Belal, the shorter fighter, coming into this one with a little bit of a reach disadvantage, but any advantage is an advantage, so Leon will take that and work that 1-2 straight down the middle. So Belal needs to be wary of that, and maybe work now's the time to start to work a little bit of head movement into the game, slip to the left, slip to the right, maybe duck down a little bit. Even not offensively, just as you're coming in, as you're entering into the pocket, when you're throwing some strikes, just to throw off Leon. And when you're in the clinch, obviously mix up the dirty bodies, mix up the dirty boxing, get him thinking, fake the trips, go for the takedowns, push him against the cage. Obviously, Belal does all of this already. And I'm not an MMA, I'm not a coach in MMA. This is just what I've seen from reviewing the fighters, from some fights from both fighters. Obviously, Belal just needs to be wary of that lead elbow when they're breaking on the clinch, because Leon is a sniper when it comes to that lead elbow. Really good fight. If Leon manages to win, it's a good name for him. He's obviously knocked off a surging contender. But I do think Dana White will fuck him over and basically say, oh, Belal wasn't that worthy. And I don't mean this as any disrespect to Belal Muhammad at all. I absolutely love him as a fighter and as a person as well. He's hilarious and he's great. I just mean Belal Muhammad's not a caliber of fighter you fight when you go to the title, if you understand what I'm saying. Obviously, Leon Edwards has already done an 8-fight high, so he should already be fighting for a title, in my opinion. But when asked at the press conference, basically, if either one of these fighters can challenge for the belt if they win, Dana White said with the most unenthusiastic tone, anything can happen. So basically, I feel like whoever wins this is basically still going to get fucked over. If Belal wins this, he should definitely get not a title shot maybe, but definitely get somebody, maybe like Colby Covington or something like that. That'd be crazy. Or even, well, no, you couldn't really give him Mike Mav. You could, I guess. Nah. But, if Belal does manage to win this, that definitely he inserts himself into the upper echelon of that welterweight division for the UFC. So it's an interesting to see how that fight's going to play out, and to see what fight is going to do to neutralise the other fighter's game plan. And that's going to be on Sunday. There is a few other fights that I am excited for. Not a lot, though, in all honesty. There's a few names on this, but not like A-star names, sort of like your lower, not to sound like a dick, but sort of like your lower league names. One fight that I'm particularly interested in is Gavin Tucker versus Dan Ige. Obviously, Dan Ige has already proven himself multiple times in the featherweight division with wins over Mirsad Bektik, Edson Barboza. Whereas Gavin Tucker's on a 2-fight winning streak in the UFC, and he's taken, he submitted Justin James in his first fight, and then took Billy Q to a decision, which is quite a good fight, to be quite frank. This is really interesting because obviously Dan Ige has, like I said, already beaten quite a few names at featherweight. Unfortunately, coming off a loss to Calvin Kattar. Um, it, it was a good fight, a good back and forth fight for Dan, but this is a good chance for him to knock off again another surging contender at featherweight. But for Gavin Tucker, it'd be really good for him to get that because it's his first top 10 opponent. It's his first sort of real test at featherweight, if you will, in terms of name power. Danny again not doing a lot at featherweight in terms of like knocking people out, but still getting wins and having fights against noticeable names and having moderate success. So it'll be interesting to see how Gavin Tucker handles his first ranked opponent and what he does to combat Danny. He's real strong wrestling and really he's got quite crisp striking as well. So yeah, that'll be a good fight as well. That was Danny Ige and Gavin Tucker. Manel Kape is making a quick turnaround. Obviously, he's just coming off a decision loss to Alejandro Pantoja, which was it's good for him to make this quick of a turnaround because if you think about it in the way that he's fought now, he's had that one fight in the UFC. Everyone always says those pre-UFC fight jitters. He's now had that fight in the UFC. He's cleared those cobwebs and he can now come into this fight a lot fresher against Matthias Nicolau. And it'd be interesting. I do really like Manel Kape in terms of his fighting ability. His actual personality seems like a little bit of a dick. Like when he fought Uncle Creepy in McCall, I think it was Ryzen that he fought him in. He was just a little bit of a knob, really. Same in this fight as well. Same in his last fight with Pantoja. He was like egging him on and like just trying to scream at him and stuff. And Pantoja was just like, "Nah, fam, I'm winning. I'm not doing what you want me to do." Manel Kape, Matthias Nicolau. That'll be a really good fight for Manel if he can get the W, gets him that first win into the flyweight division of the UFC, and gets him reinserted back into there because obviously you don't want to. Lost Alejandro Pantoja is understandable. He's a top 10 fighter. He's been in a few fights with quite a lot of people. It was a really good fight with Davison Figueiredo. So a tough test for him in his debut. Obviously, he couldn't really adjust to that. He didn't really pick up the pace at all in his fight with Alejandro. So let's hope he can reverse that and with this quick turnaround and with that first fight out of the way, he can come in and get the W against Matthias Nicolau. And then finally, the last fight that I'm truly sort of like real moist for, if you will, is Eric Anders versus Darren Stewart. England's own Darren Stewart. I absolutely love him. The dentist. He's great. Obviously, in his last fight, took Kevin Holland to a decision, which not a lot of people have managed to do recently. And had quite a bit of success in that fight against Kevin Holland, and obviously Eric Anders as well, coming off a split decision, a decision loss to Krzysztof Jotko. Both fighters are bangers. Both fighters have got really good wrestling as well. Obviously Darren, considering his English, does like to get you down to the floor and does like to wrestle you a bit. He's real good at wrestling, and Eric Anders used to be I believe it was a former football player in America. With the big shoulder pads, and then came to the UFC. Mixed success. He's bounced around in weight a little bit from light heavyweight to middleweight. Obviously booted someone's face into oblivion, and then got a little bit of a rise. But I think that he took on Thiago Santos on short notice in Brazil at light heavyweight and just gassed out really early. But this will be a good fight for both fighters. If Darren Stewart can pull this off, it's a good name in Eric Anders. He's quite well known. He's got quite a decent following. I do want obviously Darren Stewart to win. He's British. I love Eric Anders as well. It's torn me, but the Brit in my heart wants Darren Stewart to win. But they're the fights that I'm truly excited for the next week. And yeah, that's it really. It was a good Saturday. Really enjoyed it. Apart from the biased commentary and the illegal knee to the Chrome Dome for Aljamain Sterling, but apart from that, it was some really good fights. If I was to say go back and watch any, Cruz versus Kenny is really interesting just because Dominic Cruz is a delight to watch in terms of his striking, in my opinion. Take a look at, obviously, Yan versus Izzy. That was a really good fight. Very technical kickboxing match in some ways, and then Yan managed to mix it up with the takedowns as well. And yeah, a couple of fights on the next card that I'm excited for, but the next card that we'll be talking about next Wednesday will be the Edwards versus Muhammad card, and then following that, we've got Holland versus Brunson, but I'll cover that Holland versus Brunson card next week. Anyway, that was this next Saturday's card. I'm Kane, and let's all pray for the women's featherweight division.